Hi, Claudia. Welcome to Pull Up a Chair. You've had an incredibly impressive executive career and equally a more impressive non-executive career spanning the Premier League, Ocado, the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, and more recently as chair of Deliveroo and Kingfisher PLC. What does sustainable growth mean to you? And what are the biggest challenges facing businesses today?
Clearly, I'm involved in different businesses and they all have their own unique challenges, but there is some commonality across kind of what does sustainable growth mean. And I think you only get sustainable growth if you are solving a proper real customer need and you are actually delivering a product that customers want. You can't force customers to want what you're trying to give them. And so both Kingfisher and Deliveroo have grown substantially over the years by really, really delivering for what their customers want. I think that then leads into one of the challenges, which is that can change quite quickly. And as a company, you often have to be very innovative, very agile, and really understand kind of where your customers are going and where they're taking it. And particularly in a company like Kingfisher, where we manufacture a lot of products and we manufacture them sometimes quite far away, having enough agility in our understanding of what people want and our ability to predict what people will want in the future and then manufacture it and then get it into stores on time is a really genuine challenge for our business.
Deliveroo is a household name, and you led Deliveroo through its IPO back in 2021. I'd love to hear a little bit about the organisation's purpose and the journey that you've been on as an organisation and where you see the opportunities are for Deliveroo.
Deliveroo is still, relatively speaking, a baby company. It really started about 12 years ago when Will Shu, the founder, who is still our CEO today, moved to the UK from the US, and he found all these fantastic restaurants. In fact, he was working in Canary Wharf, and there were all these wonderful restaurants, but none of them delivered, and he just thought that it was incredibly odd. And he is somebody who really likes good food, and he wanted good food to be available more to more people more of the time. And he was the very first rider for Deliveroo. He just got on his bike and did deals with restaurants, made friends with people, and started delivering. And that was the beginning. So I think Deliveroo gives really positive benefits to all three sides of its marketplace. There are the riders who are self-employed, who can choose exactly when they want to work and can dial it up or down from day to day, depending on their other circumstances. Many of our riders have got other jobs or other responsibilities, and they fit their riding around that. So the flexibility is really beneficial for them. For the restaurants, what we are doing is giving them access to new customers and for all of our partners, grocery partners, and we've now also expanded into retail. And so that is really just giving people a new way to access their customers. And then for our customers, obviously, the benefit is real flexibility, and you can keep doing whatever it is that you're doing whilst your delivery comes to you.
It's really interesting because I would summarise that as sort of flexibility and access, whichever way you look at it in terms of those three components. And at the heart of that is technology. And innovation, in particular technological innovation, is really important around productivity as much as it is around delivering service to customers. What new technologies are you really excited about?
I mean, Deliveroo is at its heart a technology company, and that is what we have sort of always been. And it is really technology innovations which allow us, exactly as you say, to improve productivity and to keep improving both the financial performance of the company, but also what we are delivering in terms of benefit for all three sides of our marketplace. We at Deliveroo, we always start from what is the problem we're trying to solve, and therefore what is the best technology to solve it. So we never start by saying, we want to use more AI. How can we do that? Where should we deploy it? We start by saying, we want to make our deliveries even faster, even more efficient, even more reliable. What are all of the different things that we need to package together and to innovate to do that? So we've been using machine learning for a very long time. And now we're using that in a very nuanced way so that we really understand neighbourhood by neighbourhood, what are the factors which are impacting deliveries and how could we reroute our riders past one particular traffic light which tends to be red for longer than another particular traffic light. I mean, we are really getting down into that level of detail. And so it is all of that aggregate information that's being fed into the machines, and then different technology solutions to solve different problems.
Interesting. Yeah, start with the outcome in mind. Kingfisher is a very, very different business. Screwfix, B&Q, DIY.com, 1,900 stores, 78,000 employees across 8 countries, so very international business. What parallels would you draw from your sort of Deliveroo experience, technological journey with Deliveroo into that world? And what are sort of the opportunities and maybe even challenges for those brands?
Kingfisher might appear from the outside to be a sort of much more traditional retailer and perhaps less reliant on technology than a company like Deliveroo. I would argue actually that that's not true, and that Kingfisher is incredibly both reliant on technology, actually very good at technology, and very, very innovative. And I think the innovation is in 2 main areas. One is in product innovation, where we have a lot of our own brands, and we really, really build on our sort of customer insight about where customers want us to take the products. And I know we're going to talk later about sustainability, but there's been a huge amount of innovation for us in how we build more sustainable products that help our customers to live a more sustainable life. And that has been really interesting. We've had to use a lot of technology to support and deliver those products. I think on the other side, we've also had a lot of technological advances in how we deliver our products. So I think that e-commerce penetration within our businesses has grown by 3 times in the last 5 years. So there's a lot more people accessing our products through technology. We've also opened up DIY.com so that it's now a marketplace, so that there's a lot of other people's brands on DIY.com as well as our own, which means that from a customer perspective, there's many, many, many orders of magnitude more products available to you through that interface than there used to be. So I think there are benefits on many sides, but the technology investment is substantial.
So given that Kingfisher really has all sort of models, whether it's a physical store that you can then use technology to innovate for products, and also the platforms where you can give access to other brands. That you've got the whole spectrum of this consumer model. How do you see that model evolving over the coming years?
I think at Kingfisher, actually, all of the different models for customers are very interwoven and actually very mutually supportive, in that a lot of the time customers will do their research online, but they might then want to touch and feel the product in store, or the other way around, or they might want click and collect, or they want to be able to return something physically or not, or every customer's journey needs to be exactly how they want it to be without us kind of imposing, this is the most efficient channel for us. And so within the overall mix of things being very customer-centric, we can see that customers are increasingly choosing to shop in a more digital way and with more delivery or more click and collect. And it is possible or probable that therefore over time we can deploy the real estate that we have in our stores in a different way, and we can support customers in a different way using the space that we have.
Turning to sustainability, our latest CEO Outlook survey highlighted that 86% of the CEOs that responded said that they expected the return on investment and sustainability to take at least 3 years. Is that something that you recognise, given you've got 2 very big businesses that you've led who've had significant investments in technology and sustainability, which we'll come on to? Do you recognise that?
I do recognise that, but I think, as ever, it only tells kind of part of the story. I think in some situations, actually, a 3-year return on investment probably is a good profile and is completely acceptable. But I also think the return on investment in this space sometimes is very, very hard to measure. And I worry that sometimes we spend too much time trying to measure it and not enough time just delivering it and believing in it. And I also think that I don't want us to skew our efforts towards the things that are measurable. I want us to be deciding as businesses what is important, what should we be doing, what do we need to do, and then have the self-confidence to do that, whether it's easy to measure or not.
The point around measuring, it's quite interesting because that's a common topic of conversation, and I'm sure you have this with your peers as well. The reporting, are we spending too much time focusing on the reporting rather than the doing? And I think that's what you're highlighting here. Both Kingfisher and Deliveroo have announced significant investments in sustainability, and I think Deliveroo announced quite a significant number to invest in sustainable packaging. So how important is collaboration when you're working with partners and supply chains? And I guess also between government and business?
Clearly, we can't do this on our own. That's obviously impossible. The packaging example is a really good example where we have had to really innovate, because we need packaging that means that your food isn't spilt and that it arrives warm and that it still looks attractive, and that either your pizza isn't upside down and your soup is still in the carton and all those things. That's really, really important to the fundamental product and sort of commitment that we're making to you as our customer. However, that does involve quite a lot of packaging, and we have to be very, very thoughtful and careful about that. We've just done a really interesting thing, which was we have sponsored a competition at Sheffield Hallam University for their materials course, where to encourage students to innovate and to design much more sustainable, much better packaging, which fulfills kind of all of the different criteria. It was a brilliant competition. There's a very good result. And the winner's packaging is now going into production and will be in our supply chain within the next year. And we're running the competition again because we think that, different generations of students will have different ideas. So I think we can collaborate with different sectors and I think that's good for everybody.
Yeah. So the rise of the gig economy has really called into question how we protect the workforce. And we've also seen significant changes and reforms to the employment law introduced by the current government. How do you see that impacting how business will invest in the future?
So I think from Deliveroo's perspective, we don't always find the term gig economy very helpful because it's so broad and it actually covers kind of multiple different kind of working models for people. I think what I can tell you about is the way that Deliveroo works with the 140,000 riders that we work with in the 10 markets that we work in around the world. What we know about our riders, because we spend a lot of time surveying them and talking to them, is that they really, really want three things. They want flexibility, they want attractive earnings opportunities, and they want security in the form of kind of appropriate benefits. And that is the three areas that we really, really focus on with our riders. We have good engagement with our riders. Clearly the flexibility is absolute. They are self-employed. They can choose to log into the app and work exactly whenever they want. We've also really focused on providing more appropriate benefits. So we've got much more training, much more support. So in terms of benefits, the things that we know that our riders really want is insurance. So particularly kind of accident insurance in the really awful event that maybe they do have some kind of an accident while they're riding for us. They also want sick pay, which we now provide, and skills-based training. So we can provide all of those things. So we work very hard to make sure that our proposition for riders is attractive, and we do have a very good pipeline of people wanting to work with us, and so we think that we've got the balance about right.
The types of businesses that you've led and worked in are very different, right? From sport to technology to retail to platforms. What are the hallmarks of how you create a good culture or an inclusive culture?
It's a really important question, and it is a question that different boardrooms kind of grapple with in different ways, but that I think everybody understands how incredibly important it is. Again, it's back to it's very hard to measure, but you know it when you see it, you can feel it. And I think one of the amazing things about having worked in lots of different businesses and in lots of different industries is that I really can just feel whether the culture feels right. I think culture is something that is very, very much the responsibility of the senior leadership. And I think how the senior leadership model and behave is something that really resonates and percolates down the organisation and makes a huge difference. And I think sometimes senior leaders don't even know how much impact they are having in the way that they behave or the way that they talk, and how that is flowing down the organisation. So I'm very conscious of that, and I really try to support my senior teams in all of the sort of positive things that they do. But it is also true that different cultures are appropriate for different organisations, and a much younger business that's moving very fast and innovating very fast and et cetera, in a very competitive industry wants to have a different, faster paced, more questioning type of culture than a more established business in a different world. Different styles of leadership are so important to culture. And within Deliveroo, one of the really significant things that we have is we are still led by our founder. So Will founded the company 12 years ago. He's still the CEO. And that gives a really strong feeling to the culture of the organisation, which in many ways is shaped around Will and his particular priorities and the things that he really cares about.
And that's really interesting because you talk about role models and leaders' responsibility as role models. If I was to ask you, what are the sort of 2 or 3 sort of qualities that leaders need to demonstrate? How would you describe those qualities?
I genuinely think it is different in different industries. It's different in different companies. It's different depending on kind of what opportunity you are trying to focus on. But at its heart, I think leaders need to be authentic because people have to believe in them. You have to go to work every morning thinking, I am going to go in the direction that is set by this person, and I believe that they are doing the right thing. I think one of the things that is probably important in leadership right across the piece is having the right motivation. And I think for everybody in your organisation to believe and to know that the senior leaders are there not for themselves but for the good of the organisation is something, it's just so important.
So that's really lovely the way you talk about the motivation and doing something that's good for the organisation. And that brings me right back to the question around sustainable growth, which I often talk about in terms of meeting the needs of people, planet and profit. We've explored some of those aspects today through this conversation. As you reflect on your roles, how do you face into those needs?
That balancing act is sort of at its most acute in the boardroom. So it is what I spend an awful lot of my time and effort thinking about. And it requires constant adjustment and rebalancing, depending on what's the competitive environment, what's the economic environment, how is there a cost of living crisis, what's the tax burden, companies are constantly subject to very different forces, either positive or negative, and what we're doing all the time is kind of course correcting. But those are the 3 kind of pillars that we are navigating between. And we necessarily tilt a bit more in one direction or a bit more in another direction, depending on all the circumstances and our understanding of the future opportunities. So again, it's not something where we can say we always prioritize X. There is no rule that helps a board say this is the right answer. All we can do is say, this is the best answer that we can come up with for now, and we are educating ourselves about all of the things which are shifting and changing into the future to try and make sure that we're always relevant and appropriate.
You know, we're operating in a low growth environment globally. And as you sort of sit where you are and you run global businesses, how do you see the prospects of growth?
Growth is really, really important for businesses. It's just much easier running businesses when they're growing. There's more opportunity for investment. There's more opportunity for innovation. You can also afford to experiment more and even make a few mistakes because other things will work. So growth is a really, really important phenomenon. And it's much harder for businesses to grow when the world isn't growing and the world economy isn't growing. But that doesn't mean that businesses should give up. It just means that you have to innovate harder, you have to try harder, you have to eke out pieces of growth where you can find them. And sometimes you can go through market share growth. You just have to be better than your competition. So there are different ways of growing, even when the world is tough, I think.
So you talk about authenticity and being authentic, and it strikes me every time we speak, you come across as being very authentic. And what I see is Claudia. How do you do that?
I think a lot of the time I'm just showing up and doing my best. I think I learnt quite early on in my life to just be brave and to be me. So I'm incredibly dyslexic, and actually that has been completely positive. That is the sort of source of my magic fairy dust in lots of ways, because I've really had to be resilient. And if I can't solve something one way, I solve it another way. I've got a totally hopeless memory, so I take lots of notes, or I have to engage with people very, very directly, because there are other things that the dyslexia gets in the way of, but you can always solve a problem a different way.
Reflecting on your career, Claudia, if you could go back to your younger self, what bit of advice would you give yourself?
I think the real thing is all experience is good experience. You learn something from everything you go through. And even if it doesn't feel fun at the time, you are getting something out of it. And I've had a very broad career, so I've had lots of different experiences. And it so happens that now, in a sort of boardroom environment, that breadth is incredibly useful. At the time, my husband delightfully called my CV random, but now I feel as though all of those different things that I've done have sort of come together to be useful.
Yeah, I see that and feel that when I speak to you. You've got such a breadth of perspective, which is what the richness, isn't it, that what you bring. What sustains you outside of work?
Clearly my family, but secretly, really, my dogs.
I'm sure they'll be delighted when they hear this. Claudia, look, it's been amazing having this conversation with you, because you do have such a broad perspective, and you bring it in all the roles you have, and in interactions that we have. I'm always learning from you, because you do bring different lenses. But what I've taken away from this conversation today, it reinforces a lot of the themes that we hear. The importance of agility, whether it is, customer needs in your case, or your riders' needs, or your employees' needs, being able to be agile around what's happening around us, the flexibility. And again, organizations, as much as leaders, need to be flexible. So agility and flexibility is what I would describe as the two sort of themes coming out of this. You also threw in a little bit of rebalancing in there as well, because we are constantly recalibrating, aren't we? Because things around us are moving at such a pace. But what was really lovely is the way you articulated the role of tech. It wasn't just about productivity. It wasn't just about financial. It was about making sure it drove product innovation, but also powers innovation for customers as much as it is for the organizations. And I think that sort of power of technology in innovating for the future, and as we evolve, again, not being led by technology, but using technology to help us lead in our sectors, I think was the message I took away. And so what I've really taken away about you, Claudia, is you talked about leadership being authentic and having the right motivation, but really what I took away from that is bravery. You talked about, what gives you that bravery to face into challenges in different ways, and that's exactly how you show up. And I think one big takeaway for everybody here is all experience is good experience. Learn from everything. Thank you. It's been absolutely wonderful having you.
Thank you very much.